Renters Reform Bill. What is it and what's the purpose of it?
So it's a bill that's gone into Parliament. It's currently a white paper, so it's not law, and we kind of hope that it will be adjusted a little bit perhaps before it becomes law. But the idea is that the government have decided that the rental system is unfair on tenants, and they're trying to create a more fair environment for tenants and, in theory, landlords.
Okay. So what are the key features of the proposals?
The biggest thing that everybody seems to be talking about is the abolition of Section 21, which is, as they phrase it, a no-fault eviction. So the idea will be that landlords will have to have a legitimate reason for asking a tenant to leave. It's going to require quite a lot of amending of the current system. Section 8 won't work for the majority. For example, if a landlord needs to sell their house. At the moment, Section 8 won't help that. So they're going to have to do quite a lot of shifting around to try and make it reasonable for landlords to be able to remove a tenant when they need to for reasons other than severe rent arrears or antisocial behaviour.
And why do they want to get rid of the Section 21 and replace it with something else?
Because the theory is that it's unfair. There's this notion for some reason that people are evicted for no reason, it's all retaliatory evictions, and the reality of it is that most Section 21s are given for a reason. It usually is a completely legitimate reason. So they call it a no-fault eviction, which is kind of not entirely what it is. That's why they think it's unfair on the tenants, that a landlord can just ask them to leave for no reason.
So how then is it going to help the tenants if this comes into play? How are the tenants going to be affected by that?
Well, there's several different things. So in theory, it gets rid of the Section 21 no-fault evictions. They're also talking about regulating rent increases. So there will be sort of tribunal action potentially if it's an unfair and warranted rent increase. They're also trying to improve the standard of rental property, so landlords will have to register for the ombudsman, their own ombudsman, to try and deal with disputes and all of that sort of thing. So there's other things coming in as part of this that will protect tenants. But on the flip side of that, they're talking about getting rid of the fixed term tenancies. Everything will go onto a periodic tenancy right from the beginning, which in theory sounds good, because if you move into a house and you don't like it, you're not stuck there. But on the other...
There's no security.
No, absolutely.
No security for either landlord or tenant,
No.
I'm guessing.
No, absolutely not. And I actually think the other side of that is they're saying that they're going to ask tenants. So at the moment, a tenant has to give a month's notice at the end of their fixed term to leave the tenancy. Landlord has to give them 2 months. So they're talking about actually turning that into 2 months either side. So if you think about it, if you were a tenant and you wanted to come out of a property, you've got to give 2 months' notice. The likelihood of a new landlord waiting 2 months for you is probably nil. So if somebody can move faster, you're going to miss out every single time. But because the rental market is so tight and there aren't enough properties, you're not going to give notice and risk it for a biscuit and hope you get somewhere, are you?
No, absolutely not.
So I actually think that's a little bit counterintuitive with the current market. It doesn't take into account the current market. That's the problem.
That's the other point as well. So how do you think the proposal is going to affect the current rental market?
The rental market is such that for every decent property that goes live on the market, there are 50 applicants for it. So if you are in any way difficult to house, or a landlord's going to have to wait too long for you, they're going to pick somebody else.
Sure.
So actually, it could potentially make it harder for tenants in an already difficult market. The fact of the matter is there are not enough properties. There are too many tenants and not enough properties. So what we don't want is anything that squeezes that anymore. And the other side of it is, if you're going to force a private landlord to become their own member of an ombudsman scheme, which is going to cost them money, they can't evict their tenant if they're unhappy with them for some reason, because most Section 21s are given for a reason. Or you need to sell, your financial position's changed and you need to sell. You can't give them notice. What you're going to do is drive the landlords out.
Yeah.
And this is the real danger. So where we've already not got enough properties, you're potentially going to shrink the market and actually make the situation
less landlords, less properties.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just think, you know, with the interest rate increases and stuff, which has particularly hit buy-to-let landlords, their mortgage payments have gone up. They're talking about limiting how much they can increase rents by. They're talking about costing them more money in terms of things that they have to comply with. And it makes it less attractive to people being landlords. And most landlords are accidental, as we know. You know, most people have got one or two properties and they've inherited it, or they couldn't sell, so they bought something else and let it out. Those people don't, you know, they can't make it work financially. So either rents are going to have to massively increase, or they will just come out of the market. And we're seeing that in real terms without this bill in place. So it's a little bit worrying from that point of view, in the fact that is it going to work for what they're trying to do?
Is it going to achieve what it's aiming to achieve as it's outlined right now, do you think?
I don't think so. I genuinely don't think so. I think that you're going to squeeze the market. Anybody who doesn't need to be in the market landlord-wise will come out. I think that, you know, as it were, it depends, doesn't it? It depends on what they replace the Section 21 with, what they do to Section 8 to make it more reasonable for landlords. But the reality of it is, as things stand, on a Section 8, any notice given on a Section 8 where you go for court possession, you have to actually have a court hearing. The courts are so far behind already. People are waiting 18 months to get possession of their house on a mandatory grounds, where at the point when they've actually put the notice in, the tenant is already 2 full months in arrears. The minute you give notice, they just stop paying, they give up. And so it takes 18 months to get it into the court to get possession, and all the time you've got no money coming in, or limited money coming in.
Exactly, because a lot of landlords have got mortgages to pay.
This is it.
You know, they're not the big fat cats that everybody thinks they are.
I think that's the mistake the government are making. They have an image of what a landlord is, which isn't what a landlord is in our experience. And the other thing that it seems to be ignoring is that when you actually look at the white paper itself and how it's been set out, it's talking about private landlords. I would like to know how many landlords are actually managed. So where there's a letting agent involved, so what they're saying is roughly 30% of private landlords are not compliant. Their properties are not compliant with the law. But that's talking about a private individual landlord. What proportion of landlords are actually private individual landlords with no support from a letting agent? So if you've got a letting agent in, I would imagine that they're a lot more compliant, that there's, you know, things are dealt with much better. You'd hope, wouldn't you? You'd hope. You know, in our experience, that's what happens. We manage all of this for them. They are compliant tenancies most of the time, and if they're not, then we tell the landlord you've got a problem. And it doesn't take into account that.
No. But also, I guess it does highlight to private landlords the importance of having a letting agency involved to keep up with the compliance for them.
Well, it's always been, people underestimate the value of that. Massively underestimate the value of that. So they take into account the aggravation factor of dealing with maintenance and all that sort of thing. But in a climate where the legislation is shifting all the time, and we struggle to keep up with it. You know, we're members of ARLA to try and keep up with what the legislation changes are, so we don't miss things. Because it's shifting all the time. And a private landlord isn't going to keep up with that.
No, they're not even going to be aware of that change without some help from potentially a managing agent.
No. But at the same time as that, are you actually going to create a situation where, if you've got to be a member of an ombudsman scheme on your own, and you've got to sign up, they want to do this sort of property portal, which actually means that landlords have to demonstrate their compliance, which I actually think is a great idea. I think that all compliance documents should be in one location. You know, I think that's a really good idea. However, people are going to think, oh, what do I need an agent for? And they miss the importance of having that person who's actually keeping them on top of things, because there's basic compliance and then there's the finer details of it all. and then there's the ongoing changes. And the compliance portals will basically, it's in place for the government to, or the councils, local councils, to do what they had to do on foot. So where they'd go and arrange an appointment to go, and well, we've had it, haven't we, where they've actually gone and met with some of our tenants and checked our compliance.
Yeah.
So the idea is that it's going to circumvent that, but who's watching it?
Yeah.
Like, they haven't got enough people. The local governments haven't got enough people. The courts haven't got enough people. Trading standards don't have enough people to deal with what they're dealing with already. Who's dealing with all this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's ill-conceived, in my opinion.
There we go. That is correct.